Thank you, Spider, and good day to everyone watching both here and abroad. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, one and all. We are here this morning because our country is in trouble. Our country is in deep trouble. Our country is being failed by this SLP government, by those who claim to be leading us, but are instead damaging our country. Let me start by saying responsibility for the GPH fiasco falls at the feet of the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance, and also critically the Minister of Investment, who appears to have been the one who brokered this bad one-sided transaction. Now, we know that this is not a good deal for St. Lucia, and key port assets have been disposed of in a manifestly improper manner. But who is the minister with responsibility for ports? Who is the minister with responsibility for SLASPA? Who was ultimately entrusted as the custodian of those important strategic assets? That is none other than Minister Stephen King. Under his watch, under Stephen King's watch, strategic assets have been disposed of, some say given away, and most business people, most people who trade will tell you that the port is not functioning anywhere close to optimal levels. And that has resulted in long delays in clearance of goods, which is adding significant cost to you, the traders, consumers, and not only adding cost to your everyday goods, but adding to the frustration being experienced by business people and St. Lucian citizens at large. And it is you who are paying the price for these failures. It is us, all of us. But this is not altogether unusual for Stephen King. Look at the state of our roads, the worst they've ever been. Our water supply, we continue to be in a rolling crisis with many communities suffering a lack of access. Why is this administration not taking proper care of our infrastructure and of our people? And let's go now to the GPH deal, or as Mr. Montoot said, the GPH steal. What we know as a matter of public record is minimal. But what we do understand is the government has handed over control of our port to a foreign company. St. Lucians need to understand why one of our most valuable national assets have been literally given away. We also know that before the GPH deal, the cruise passenger head tax was $6.50 US, which amounted to $1.50, which was allocated to solid waste management, and $5 US split between SLASPA and central government. Today, the head tax is $12.50 per person. But GPH receives $10 US, while SLASPA receives only $1, and of course $1.50 to solid waste management. Let me repeat this. GPH gets $10 US, while SLASPA receives $1, and solid waste $1.50. And one would be reasonable to ask, why? Why would Stephen King, who has ultimate responsibility for SLASPA, allow such a deal that robs SLASPA of critical revenue, a critical revenue stream, and gifts a foreign company $10 per head? Why? And I think this also must be understood in the context of SLASPA over the last number of years, and certainly in recent times, needing to strengthen its balance sheet, which has been and has come under severe pressure. And for those of you who may have access to the 2022-2023 financial statement, if you were to subtract the airport development charge from SLASPA's income, which grows $37 million, and of course that airport development charge cannot be used for operational reasons or purposes, SLASPA would have suffered an operating loss of 4.4 million EC dollars. In other words, SLASPA's financial health currently, and certainly according to its 2022-2023 financial statement, is in poor condition. The financial position of SLASPA is likely to have further deteriorated during the financial year 2023-24. So let me again be clear. The Minister of Ports, who has ultimate responsibility for SLASPA, rather than helping to strengthen the balance sheet of SLASPA, has allowed a transaction that would starve the Port Authority of much needed revenue, needed to cover existing liabilities, to maintain the staff, and critically to invest in the ports in the interest of all St. Lucians. So now we have heard from the government that this GPH deal is what they call good foreign investment. Really? Why then did GPH have to borrow our money from local institutions to pay off a debt of 17 million US dollars? Money borrowed by SLASPA for the construction of the Dolphin berths at Point Seraphin, which would have allowed for Quantum class ships to berth at Port Castries. And why did GPH not use its own funds? Why did it have to borrow money from our banks? This will be investigated and answers to those questions will be revealed. And I think we will recall a foreign investor comes to St. Lucia, acquires an asset and uses that asset as the basis for getting a loan from a local bank. Does this sound familiar? Do we remember Cabot? Cabot did the same thing. What did the then opposition say? What did Ernest Hilaire and Philip J. Pierce say? What did the so-called independent voices, civil society say? You know what they said? They vilified the investor and said that Alan Chasney was giving away our patrimony. Yet today, we hear deafening silence from those who shouted from the top of the mountain that Cabot was not a bona fide foreign investor because they relied on mezzanine financing from a local institution. Such utter hypocrisy. Where are they now? If this was not enough, of course we know that the Vieux-Fort Port has been left out of this transaction. Was it because the previous United Workers' Party administration under Alan Chasney really wanted to see Vieux-Fort develop, really wanted a home port for the people of Vieux-Fort, a project which would have doubtlessly boosted the economy in the South? But instead, the GPH deal has effectively made SLASPA a passive observer to St. Lucia's development. Any government decision or action taken must be taken in the interest of St. Lucia and St. Lucians. This has to be the key and fundamental motivator and driver of any decision. Again, I ask, when this steal took place, because it certainly was not a deal, where was King? We need answers from the senior minister in this Labour administration, Stephenson King. Why would the government of St. Lucia give up critical revenue, a critical revenue stream, in a time where so much is needed in this country? Who is and will be responsible for the redevelopment, reconstruction of Berth 4, which is of course required by GPH? What role did you, Minister King, play in this outrageous transaction? Why has there been such a significant decline in cruise ship passengers since this deal came into effect? Our ports have been empty and have not seen cruise passengers in months. And critically, for the ordinary man and woman who depends on the tourism sector, who depends on the cruise passengers, who will compensate you, the taxi driver, you, the tour guide, the restaurateur, the market and arcade vendor, for this loss in income because of lower passenger arrivals from our cruise ports? So let me summarize the little that we know. Minister King and his colleagues agreed to a deal that reduced government income from $6.50, $6.50, $2.50, which was going to $1.50 for solid waste, and $5 split between central government and SLASPA. This was done again at a time when SLASPA's balance sheet was already under severe pressure. This was done against the clear advice of SLASPA's management and critically the technocrats in the Ministry of Finance. This government then increased the passenger tax to $12.50. Most of it, $10 US, is given now to GPH. And then GPH goes to our local institutions and borrows $40 million to complete this transaction. The GPH deal bars now the government from making critical investments in the south of the island. Is this right for Labrie? Is this right for Mico? Is it right for Viewfort? That the prospect of having a cruise ship port, which would allow for much needed investment to bring in tourists, to bring in additional opportunities for the young men and women of the South, now this dream that the UWP administration under Alan Chastney had and continues to have, under this deal, it will not happen. They then increased the head tax, and this increase is likely to have made St. Lucia less competitive to other islands with much lower head tax than ours. And also, SLASPA has a significant infrastructural deficit, particularly with respect to Berth 4, one of its most important berths. And it would require tens of millions of dollars to invest in Berth 4 to rehabilitate and reconstruct it. Where is that money coming from? Is SLASPA now required to find financing to redevelop Berth 4 to put at the disposal of GPH when the government, through this deal, has already crippled SLASPA by significantly reducing its income? How does that make sense in Lucia? But to top this off, all of this was done through a lease that gave up our most important assets for the princely sum, and I'm being a bit facetious here, of $1 a year for up to 40 years. St. Lucia, make this make sense. This is a failure of this current administration, and it's an evident dereliction of their responsibility to you, to us. What is not clear is why has Minister King, who is squarely responsible for ports, not acted to ensure that this deal was more balanced and accorded some benefit to the people of St. Lucia, acting to provide answers to the people of St. Lucia. And we were expecting answers from Minister King. He's been deadly silent on this matter. You are ultimately responsible for SLASPA. You are ultimately responsible for the ports, and we've heard nothing from you. We should be acting to leverage those ports in the interest of St. Lucia and to the benefit of the future generation. This is the same Minister King who, at the last election, indicated that he was an independent voice. We have heard nothing from this independent voice on this outrageous GPH deal, nor on any other matter whatsoever of consequence to this country in the past 4 years. He has simply toed the line of the Labour government while he enjoys the perks and the expenses which come with it. This is a travesty, and this deal is another glaring example of the gross mismanagement and incompetence of this Labour administration and its agents like Stephenson King. St. Lucia, we call on you to make your voices heard, to fight for this country, and to restore good governance. The time for change is now. Change must come to this country. I thank you.